just targeting bait schools can be difficult for many reasons. Just because number one, you don't always know what's in your area, and number two, it's so, I mean, it's so bait fish dependent. If it's most of the bait fish, and this is very general, but most of the bait fish feed on small enough bait that they get really pushed around by the wind. The bait that they feed on, or the food source that they feed on, and those bass in turn follow the bait. And I think that is a very important key, and really the number one pillar of what I base all of my fishing off of is following the wind. And I have people telling me that I shouldn't be doing that, but it's just never really failed me ever. If there's a good onshore wind, I don't care what direction the wind's blowing. If I have an onshore wind in a location, I feel much more confident that if it's a crosswind or an offshore wind. Crosswinds are not as bad, but if it's not like, if it's offshore at all, I'm not going to be as confident as it is if it's onshore. Now, that can all be, it really depends on the day. But most of the bait fish that I like to target, which is 99.9% of the time Atlantic menhaden, and they're filter feeders, and they'll feed on bait, or whatever they feed on, plankton and little particles in the water. That stuff is going to get blown around in the wind, and in turn, those Atlantic menhaden are going to get blown around in the wind, and those big bass are going to be on those Atlantic menhaden feeding on them, and therefore they're also going to get pushed around by the wind. Now, this doesn't mean that a bass can't stage up and start feeding on bait in specific spots no matter the wind, because that happens too. But for fishing off the rocks in particular, I really like to follow the wind.